Well, great. So we're live, everybody.
Good. I wanted to be live. That's excellent. Hi, everybody. My name is Gordon Stewart.
Yeah.
You're a fool.
Welcome, everybody, to the Racing Foolz podcast, powered by Low Budget TV and brought to you by Crown Performance. Today's special episode, pretty crazy week, guys. Coronavirus has basically shut down all of racing. Actually, I'm supposed to introduce you guys, right? I kind of forgot that.
Well, you don't have to.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want people to tune out too soon.
We'll be like Alcoholics Anonymous and just be like, "Hi, I'm Tommy Mason."
Well, joining us today, in addition to the Low Budget TV team of Jeffrey Best and Tommy Mason, is Jason Galvin. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here.
For those of you guys who don't know Jason, Jason is now one of the voices of NHRA, traveling, well, when the races are going on,
Yeah.
traveling to all the races.
What was that you said about a crazy week?
Yeah. So, well, we'll get back to that later. But just Jason, just tell everybody your background and who you are, and obviously you're working with NHRA now, but you did a lot of stuff before that.
Yeah, sure. I actually, I'm pretty busy, fortunately, when the world is not upside down like it is right now. So I do national event announcing for NHRA and NHRA.tv, and like I said, I've been pretty fortunate this year. They expanded my role quite a bit, and I am the play-by-play voice for CSU Bakersfield, Cal State University Bakersfield, for all of their major sports for the most part. So women's basketball, baseball, softball, men's soccer, women's soccer. I do some men's basketball and women's volleyball as well, and that all streams on the ESPN app. So either ESPN Plus or ESPN3 on the free side of things. And the conference they were in, which feels really weird to say, the Western Athletic Conference, because they're moving next year, and they should still be in it for 3 more months. But since college sports is canceled for the year, they're, I guess, now formally part of it. Has a streaming network as well I do stuff on, and then been fortunate to do some stuff for MAV TV up at Irwindale Speedway with Kenny Shepard and Stephen Blakesley and that team, and I've done some stuff with the low budget guys. Obviously, it was the announcer at Irwindale Speedway for, what was it, like 5, 6 years, I think, maybe, if you somewhere in there. There was a break in there, and actually, ironically, have much of my career to I don't want to say blame. I guess some people don't want to listen to me can say much of my career to blame to Tommy and Jeffrey, so, who were coincidentally the best men in my wedding. So,
Right, the pair.
Yeah, so we all go back quite some time.
I don't know what Jason was thinking, having us have anything to do with his wedding.
Yeah, well, I just figured that the least that I could do for you two opening the door for me in the world of motorsports, announcing and broadcasting, was to give you your choice between prime rib and salmon at the buffet dinner. So.
Well, we always appreciate.
Wait, it was sea bass. I just thought about that. Man, I don't remember what I ate at my own wedding.
Well, we appreciate the free meal for sure. So I kind of want to go back to the first days that we got to know Jason. Jeffrey and I, we would go to Irwindale Speedway very often, and there would be a group of Santa Clarita Valley people that we'd go hang out with in the pits after the races. Everybody was too busy, pre-race and autograph session and everything. But after the races, we just gather around, and I want to say this is probably 2006, 2007 when we got to know Jason, because there's always Jason there, but we kind of didn't really know of him. He was out there crewing for a pair of truck teams, the spec trucks out there at Irwindale Speedway. But then he would we all got to know each other and whatnot. We'd go to In-N-Out after the races in Santa Clarita, and then we just finally got to know each other by going to the races on Saturday, and then Sunday we'd all gather around a friend's house and we'd watch NASCAR on Sunday. So we had no choice but to know who Jason was. And when we were on our way to the races one day, Jason was already at this point helping crew on our race car that we'd run at Irwindale Speedway. He was kind of just helping everybody in the pits, but he'd swing by and help me out quite a bit. One day we got a phone call. Jeffrey and I were traveling to the races like a normal day. We got a phone call saying, hey, do you know anybody who could announce? Because you guys are racing, we would pick you, but do you know anybody who would announce? And the first person in my brain was Jason Galvin. And Jason, do you remember that day when you?
Yeah.
So
100%.
Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I was, it was 2000 and.
I gotta say that. Probably 08 maybe.
Well, I'm trying to think. What was the year we were closed? We were closed in 2012.
2012 we closed. Yeah.
Yeah. So this would have been in the summer of 2008.
Yeah, I believe so.
And I was working on at that time. Actually, it was 2009 because at that time Jimmy Rickard had stepped aside from the trucks. And
That's right.
And moved up.
Yep.
I was working on a combination of Dennis Furden's super late model with Rich DeLong in them, and then your pure stock, Tommy, that you guys. And you guys called. Tommy specifically called, and it was like, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. I was just getting ready to walk out of my house, and I just remember him saying, "Bring something nice to wear tonight."
Yeah. Yep.
And I thought, what? Like, I'm spotting for a super late and working on that thing, and I was like the quasi crew chief on Tommy's car, which explains why he ran like crap. And I was like, what do I need to wear something nice for? Like, are we planning on winning tonight? Like,
yes, heck yeah. We brought the cheater motor this week.
Right, I guess. Yeah, it would have been the only thing that would have helped us. And
Tommy's winning a championship.
Yeah.
And he goes, Bob DeFazio, who at the time was, the general manager of the track, they're looking for an announcer. The track announcer at the time was Larry Naston, and he had something come up, and then they wanted Tommy and Jeffrey, like Tommy said, but they were running the car, and they had a low budget deal going on, and so like, oh yeah, Bob is going to move Gordon Stewart Lugnuts, as everybody knows him, up into the booth, and they want you to do the on-track stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, and this was either May or June. I remember that part because it was real early in the year. Mm-hmm. It's funny what you remember about things that end up being key moments in your life that you don't realize are key moments at the time, right?
Right, yep.
So, like, I would have never guessed that night could lead to so much. But the funny thing is, I could tell you the first interview I ever did on a mic in auto racing, and like a 10-second background. Oh, why'd they pick Jason? Other than, talks a lot or whatever, right? Is I was the sports director at the time at the radio station in Santa Clarita. So we were doing high school football and high school basketball, and I went to College of the Canyons, which is a community college, and was studying, broadcast journalism. So I had a background, and Tommy and Jeffrey at this point knew this, and we had talked about a lot of things, and I'd kind of photobomb some of their low budget stuff just to be a dick and try. Can I say that on here?
Yeah,
I can.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We only look for the truth. Yeah.
Well, it is the truth, But I was trying to make myself, feel good or something at the time, and Tommy and Jeffrey were the cool guys in school. Everybody wants to be the cool guy, right? So, the first interview I did was a trophy dash that, and this should tell you, diverging careers that were both non-existent at the time became so much, right? My first interview was with Ryan Partridge, who had just won his first event in any type on the oval there. It was a trophy dash in Steve Latina's truck.
Yep, that's way back, yeah.
And, like, you talk about, like, two careers, like, one's a driver and one's announcing or whatever, that, like, had you told either of us where they were going, like, I know Ryan had bigger goals than, where he ended up getting, but, like, Ryan Partridge won NASCAR West Series races. Like, a lot of guys don't get to do that, and, like, same thing. Like, I think if he and I sat down over a beer and looked back at that night, like, here he was driving a truck that, perennially ran around in, like, 11th or 12th every night. I love Steve, but Steve would probably be the first one to tell you the best thing Steve ever did was put Ryan Partridge in his truck.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
I don't think either of us would have had any clue where it would go from there. But yeah, I remember everything about the day. I mean, I had to call Dennis and ask him, like, are you good with this? Like, I was spotting at the time. Todd Southwell, God rest his soul, what a great guy he was. Todd stepped up. He was the crew chief on the car and stepped up to spot for Dennis that night so I could go announce. And I'll never forget. I did some of that on track stuff, and then I got to go up into the booth and call a little bit of racing action with Gordon. And I'll never forget, I came back down, and Todd was the first person I saw, and he went, you got to stop working on race cars, dude. You go announce. And then nothing came of it, right? Like, Larry came back, and you guys did your pre-race, and Gordon did whatever. Yeah. And it was Kevin O'Brien, of all people, who gave me another chance, like, late August. And Gordon was out, and one of you two did on track. And I did a little bit of stuff, and they stuck me up in the booth. And that night I'll never forget, too, because we were in the booth, and it was me and Larry Naston. And speaking of God rest their soul, right, Larry, we had a lot of laughs over Larry, but nobody can ever argue the guy had a heart the size of the Grand Canyon,
Absolutely.
And he cared about us, which was cool.
Yeah.
He cared about the three of us, Tommy, Jeffrey, Jason, the future, the potential future, what we could mean to auto racing in Southern California, which I don't think at the time when we were, 18, 19, 21, even we understood the potential impact that we could have, and God rest Larry's soul, but I'll never forget he was sitting up there, and I was like the fill-in guy for him, and the legend cars came up, and he looked at me and he goes, do you want to call the legend car race? And I went, sure, like, why not, right? It's the worst that could happen. And anybody who's been in the Irwindale press box, knows that there's these big glass panes between, the announce booth, the press box, the race control, the extra box it's used for TV when they had TV races. Yep. And we were on like lap 6 of a legend car race. It was pretty good races back in like 2009, I think we said, right? So like legend cars were, we were 30 cars deep back then, 25, 30 cars, incredible race. And I'll never forget, Larry leaned across me while I'm announcing a race to bang on the glass to get Bob DeFazio and Lester Boyer's attention. And the thought through my mind was like, oh my gosh, I suck so much that we're 6 laps in and I'm fired. and Larry's like, I mean, I swear, people in the 2,500 people in the grandstands had to be like, what in the hell is that noise? It's Larry, like, boom, 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 like banging on a window. And he finally gets Bob's attention. And again, for anybody listening to this who knows Bob DeFazio, just imagine that look, and we've all seen it. And it's that look like, what the hell do you want?
Yeah.
And it's a great look. It's one of the best looks I've ever seen from a boss. It just stands out. Like, you see that look and you're like, wow, this better really be good. And Bob looked over and Larry screams, and I'm sure this is why I wish we were streaming in 2009. I'm sure the microphone picked this up. Larry goes, this guy's really good. He's good. And I'm like, at this point, we're on like lap 9, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so awkward.
Right. Here you are thinking that you are going to get thrown out of this booth to get the ultimate compliment, in front of the boss and everything.
Right.
So
right. In the most inopportune time.
Right.
Like,
middle of the race, 3 wide for the lead.
Couldn't have waited. Right. Yeah. Couldn't have waited for lap 35 and the checkered flag. So, those are, like I said, it's crazy because you don't realize it at the time, and you think back, and here we are, gosh, what is 2 decades worth of, later, 11 years later, we're into the 2020s now. And it's like, man, like those things, first off, they pop out. You remember every moment of those things like it was yesterday, and then I think it's good because it helps you remember, when you're lucky, like all of us have been, every one of us here has been lucky to make a living in some way, shape, or form doing what we really love, and to see some places that we may have not gotten to see, and you think back to some of the people that played a role in that, and I think that's really cool. That's one of the great things about the human mind. I've found is that you always kind of tend to remember the specifics of crucial moments in your life, even when you don't realize
Mm-hmm.
crucial, you know? So to me, that's really cool. That's why I said, I you know, for me, you know, I think back to the start of my career and you two and Larry and Gordon and, you know, Bob and Kevin at Irwindale, you know, I don't know if anybody had any idea what the potential was at the time, you know, but, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, that the same guys I just rattled off, you know, and Bruce Landers in there, and man, I feel lucky I got to work with him later on, you know,
totally.
but I know you guys got to work with him on the first go round, but I'm sure you two sit back, you know, you two, Tommy and Jeffrey, sit back and go, man, like, you know, we're not in Florida and Indiana and live streaming all over the world and doing these things. You know, if it wasn't for a couple of guys at a half mile in San Gabriel Valley that went, you know what, we kind of like these guys. Let's give them a shot.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. It is very eye-opening. It's very humbling, and it's also very educational too. To know, you know, to never forget your past, and to always reflect on it when the next step happens. We don't know when the next step's going to be. It just happens when it does. But it's always fun to remember those moments, Jeffrey.
I was just gonna say that, like, you know, just Jason bringing up, you know, some of these names. I'm like, man, we could have a whole week-long podcast devoted to Larry Naston stories alone. like you said, like, Larry was a guy with such a big heart, but at the same time, he was one of those individuals who not only cared so much about what he did, but he was also somebody who cracked us up.
Oh gosh,
whether intentionally or not, and it was God, what an experience that was. And I think back to what Jason makes such a good point, that there's so many memories that you kind of garner that at the time that you're living it, you don't realize it's going to have any impact. Because similar to you, Jason, when you got your phone call from Tommy, I can vividly tell you where we were on the freeway when Tommy got a call. We're sitting in the back of his mom's van. We're driving past the 118 on the 210, and Tommy's phone starts ringing. It's about, 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're just headed to the track for another day of racing. And next thing we know, Tommy's on the phone with Bob DeFazio saying, "You guys are on your way to the track, right?" And Tommy, you could probably tell this story a little bit better since you were the one on the phone for this, but that was a day that, as Jason alluded to, was the one that propelled us to essentially getting into this in the first place. Tommy, what was the call you got?
Well, I mean, it's very similar, just a few years different. Got the phone call, and Bob was asking, "You guys are on your way to the track, right? How soon can you be here?" And that was the moment that lunch got canceled. So we weren't going to eat either Mexican food or burgers and pastrami at the Hat of Pepe's.
Wait. I was just going to say.
So I was pissed.
You skipped the Pepe's trip over this?
We had to, because we needed to be there by 3:30
I wasn't
to
happy,
announce
Jason.
qualifying. And, I mean, what are we going to say? No.
I'm so disappointed.
Right. Yeah. Well, we got it back, and we just made it to where the Hat had to close early after the races. But but no, similar phone call. We were in our T-shirt and shorts, not dressing pretty, and we had to be in the booth at 3:30 for qualifying, and then on-track autograph session, and again back in the booth for the race. And that was a night where, if I remember correctly, either there was, maybe I don't remember correctly. I think that there was, Bruce had to be at an IndyCar event or had to be somewhere. I don't think it was April for Long Beach, but I think what happened was there was a plan that didn't work, that we were plan D, and that's what it came to. So, as we all know, it's not like I was working full time at Irwindale. So not once did Bob come to me and say, "Be ready, we might need you on Saturday." It was quite literally out of the blue, wearing nothing fancy, just going as spectators, eventually going to shoot video that night. That's all our plan was. And I mean, that was a pretty special moment. And to think then what we're doing now is way, way far-fetched. But it's amazing to look back and be, grateful of those opportunities.
it's funny that you bring up the Plan D deal, and I don't know where you guys are planning on going with any of this, but I'll just leave this here, and we can tell the story whenever, if we even want to. But the Plan D deal is literally the reason that I have a career with NHRA right now. So it's like so much of life is right place, right time, right? But so much more of it is capitalizing on being in the right place at the right time. And you know, I'm not to like pat any of us on our backs, right? But at least we can look back and go, you know, we didn't, you know, spoil that opportunity, you know. And there's a lot of opportunities in life, people, you know, they mess up and you learn from it. That's the great thing, you know, about life. I'm a big believer that, you know, the things that you fail at, you know, and the way that you learn from them are a much bigger indicator of success than the things you succeed at. You know, but it's just so funny that, you know, like you said, you guys were the Plan D, and here you are, you know, in many ways we're, you know, at the forefront of the world we live in now, where racing's at your fingertips and streaming and stuff, especially on the West Coast. You know, there's some great big companies on the East Coast, but when it comes to the West Coast, I don't think there's any question that low budget TV is who people turn to for their racing coverage on the West Coast, you know, and it's just so funny that, you know, I think back to where my NHRA announcing career started, and same thing, you know, right place, right time, was not at all the person who was supposed to be on the mic that day.
Yeah, right.
But it worked out, you know, so go.
Well, I definitely want to come back to this, Jason, to of course hear the story. What I am curious about, though, to almost lead us into that, is things have been very, like, you could really just draw a huge circle in the sand and say, here's Jason, and then bam, full circle. Because for you, you know, not to put words in your mouth, but as much as Tommy and I know you, it's NHRA and drag racing in general was such a prominent part when it comes to family and your childhood. And then you ended up in the circle track stuff, and then bam, here you are, you know, doing broadcasting with NHRA. What I'm curious about is maybe a little bit about that childhood and what racing meant to you and the family, and then how that ever even led to you, you know, ending up one day in the pits at Irwindale.
Sure, yeah. It's funny that you bring that up, because without drag racing and the NHRA, there is no Jason in the pits at Irwindale working on cars. Which is, it's just, like I said, it's just so ironic, you know, or, you know, interesting that's kind of where the circle came from, you know. And as I sit here, you know, I'm in my office at my computer, and I look around in my room, you know, and I have so much history and NHRA stuff in here. You know, my uncle is Pat Galvin, and you two know, and it's not really a big secret, you know. I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell anybody that I had a bad childhood. You know, I worked in TV news. I've seen people that have had bad childhoods, you know, but, you know, like many people these days, you know, my parents, you know, had kind of a rough go of it, and they separated when I was, you know, 8, 9, 10, in that range. And my uncle was the one who said, you know, not going to let you, you know, kind of fall by the wayside. Not to say that either of my parents were going to let me at all, you know, but they were both going through their own things. And, you know, the ending of a relationship and having a small child involved, and, you know, all the stuff that can come with that is a complicated thing. And it's an emotional thing. And my uncle, Pat, my dad's brother, was, you know, he had twin sons who had just been born, and a daughter on the way, 15 months apart, 16 months apart, and still, you know, went out of his way to make sure that I was well taken care of and included in things, and really kind of took me on as, you know, a fourth kid. And Pat was involved in drag racing for a long time. Ironically, my dad was actually involved in drag racing first, you know, when they were teenagers, young teenagers, because you could do this back in, you know, the 60s and 70s. You know, 14-year-olds could just, you know, get out of school on a Friday and go to Lions Drag Strip or OCIR or Irwindale or Riverside or Ontario, or name your track, you know, and just, you know, I want to work in a race car. How old are you? 14. Great. Can you turn a wrench? Like, you know the difference between tight and loose? Yep,
Yeah.
okay, you're in.
Pack the chutes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. What chutes? Yeah, back then, come on.
Right.
You know, who needs parachutes? When, you know, there's a hill at the end of the track. So, so my dad had been working on some drag type of cars, and then my uncle, they grew up in the Reseda area, and right down the street, literally down the street, like 4 houses down, was a gentleman named Bob Pickett, who in the drag racing world, if anybody's listening to this and knows Bob Pickett, that they're probably aging themselves a little, but Bob was a pretty prominent funny car racer in Southern California back in the 60s and 70s. Brought the U.S. Marine sponsorship into drag racing, which was a really cool deal. It was a big deal back then, right, to have like the United States Marine sponsoring your car, like a corporate deal like that. And Pat was like 13 or 14, and it's so ironic that I'm telling you the story from Bakersfield, where I live now, because Pat's story is that he went down to Bob's house and worked on the car a little bit here and there. And his summer break, I think he was 14 years old, got out of school and woke up on a Friday or Saturday morning, and my grandpa, Pat, my dad's dad, woke him up out of bed while it was still dark and said, "Pack your stuff." He didn't use the word stuff, obviously. Pat went, "Where are we going?" Said, "Pack your stuff." They got in the car and drove up the Grapevine, went to Zingo's, which is a restaurant right off the 99 and downtown down here, and had a fried egg sandwich. Got back in the car and went 30 more minutes north, got off at 46, hung a right, went to Auto Club Famoso Raceway, and he dropped Pat off with Bob Pickett's funny car for a match race in Famoso and said, "See you at the end of summer, kid."
Wow.
And that's how things were done back then,
Right.
I'm sure a lot of the NASCAR guys have similar stories too. To make that story short, but I always love that part of the story. My uncle had an incredible career in drag racing as a mechanic and a crew chief. Was a part of some of the biggest moments in drag racing history. Was the crew chief when Tom McEwen beat Don Prudhomme in the finals at Indy in 1978, which many drag racing historians consider the greatest single drag race of all time. Don Prudhomme is Don Prudhomme. He's the Dale Earnhardt of drag racing. He's the Snake.
Right.
He was in the midst of an incredible 4-year run where he lost like 2 national events in 4 years or something like that, maybe 3. The only race he lost in 1978 was Indy of the 8 national events. And Tom McEwen was the mongoose, and they made a movie in The Snake and the Mongoose. But what a lot of people don't realize is that Tom McEwen didn't have a lot of success on the track. He was a great marketer, but Prudhomme was the driver, right? Prudhomme was the racer, and McEwen was the marketer, and together they were really successful. But Tom's son Jamie had just died from leukemia a couple weeks earlier. I know that'll hit you a little bit, Tommy.
Right. Yeah.
They went to Indy. They got lucky in the semifinals. They had a bye run. Billy Bones, Bill Miller, who's like another grandpa to me, was like a co-owner on the team, sponsor on the team. Told my uncle, we should really try a new rear end gear on this thing. I think that could be the difference. Nobody could run with Don Prudhomme at the time. And so in the semifinals, they had a bye run because the other guy had broken. They knew it, so they stuck this rear gear in the car they'd never run before. They only ran it to half track. It ran really well. They came back in. Everybody was like, "Oh, they don't have a chance," because they shut the car off early on purpose. And they were like quietly, confident and optimistic, and they went out there in the final round and beat Don Prudhomme. I mean, if you're sitting here listening to this and you don't know that story, just type in, Snake and Mongoose Indy, on Google, Indy's 78 funny car, anything like that. You'll see all sorts of videos. I can point my uncle out. It's the guy with the long hair jumping up and down like a 10-year-old on Christmas morning when Mongoose wins the race, And so to me, that's really cool because in the drag racing world, that's like when Earnhardt won Daytona. Everybody knows it. It's just this incredible moment. It plays on a loop in the museum down in Glendora next to, or in Pomona, actually, at the Fairplex, the NHRA Wally Parks Motorsports Museum. The car that they won the race with is down there. It's got his name on the side of it, crew chief Pat Galvin. And so for me, that's a really cool deal. So anyways, that's that story, that moment just means so much that I have to always include that part. But
of course,
he went on, he was crew chief he went to work for Snake. and for Shirley Muldowney and a lot of other people. And still to this day now, he's involved in drag racing in a big way through business opportunities. So that's kind of our family background. You know, when I was 14, I was a sophomore and junior in high school. I got to go work on Shirley Muldowney's car her last year racing because my uncle was one of the driving financial backers of that program and helped kind of put that deal back together with Action Collectibles and a couple other sponsors. And he had some businesses at the time. So Shirley Muldowney's last couple years, you know, he's a big part of that. And I got to work on the car. So that was really cool for me. You know, my cousins, you know, and they're more like my brothers and sisters. They were never old enough to really get to work on them, although they do now, you know, but to get to work on them with the family, with Pat. And I got that opportunity, which was cool. And that led me to circle track racing, which is Jimmy Rickart, who we talked about, started racing at Irwindale, was racing go-karts and stuff. Well, his grandpa, Jim, Dudley as we call him, worked on drag racing cars, funny cars and dragsters back in the 60s and 70s and 80s with my uncle. And then in his later years in racing before he retired, he drove the motor coach for Jim Gennard, who was the founder and owner of Oakley when they had Scotty Cannon and then Gary Selzy driving their funny cars. So, so Jimmy and I were only a couple years apart, and we lived down the street from each other in Castaic. We used to play, hang out, play Hot Wheels and whatever, and ride our bikes together. And Jimmy was a go-kart racer, and I never got into go-karting. And when they went super truck racing with Logan Henson, who had already been out there for a couple years, but they were karting teammates, Jimmy asked me, like, hey, you want to work on the car? So that's how I ended up at Irwindale, which is why I say it's so funny that drag racing, my uncle and Jimmy's grandpa were working on cars together 40 years ago, and somehow we ended up at Irwindale Speedway, working on short track cars. So, it's a crazy deal. Like you said, Jeff, my family, I know it's really long-winded, but it's hard, when your family has been so involved in the sport and has been as lucky, as we've been. It's hard to leave out little parts because it helps tell the whole story, and it's really cool for me when I get to go to, when I go to my uncle's house down in Santa Clarita and walk into his office, and there's Wally's, which is the trophy the NHRA gives out, and they give out it looks bronzish, it's like an unpolished gold one for winning national events, and then they give out a really shiny polished one for winning world championships, and he's got them both, and you just walk in and you're like, okay, I get it, big deal, cool deal.
And I know Jeffrey and I have been fortunate enough to do some 4th of July celebrations, and we've seen them, and
yes,
in that little man cave office kind of combo, it is pretty incredible to see some things that not a lot of people have.
Yeah. Almost as incredible as the fireworks show they put on.
Right.
Hey, for a long time, we were putting on a fireworks show that Magic Mountain was envious of.
Yeah. Charlie, I feel like you've only said 2 things at the beginning of the show, so I'll give you some time.
Yeah, I'm just soaking this in. I mean, you already kind of touched on the NHRA part, which I was going to ask about anyway, so that's good. One other thing I did want to ask was, I remember after Tommy started working at MAV, he was showing me some videos of you guys, when you guys were all growing up, racing RC cars in a garage.
Yep.
Wow, I didn't think we'd go here tonight.
I feel like
I need to go pour another drink.
Right, absolutely. You might, yeah. So that was back in the low budget Cup days, which, funny enough, that was again the Santa Clarita crew, but that was really led up by racer Connor Contrell, who was a truck racer against the very same team that Jason was crewing for, and Connor's little brother. Those two found these $20 RC cars at Toys R Us or somewhere, and they got serious about it. Serious enough to where they asked for broadcasting support by way of low-budget TV, and that's when we realized there's people who like RC car racing. Not the professional kind, the $20 toy RC car racing. And so we would go to the shop on like a Wednesday night, and they made a makeshift tracks. And then, of course, Ken Mailer and his son Kenny would set up their own track in Acton. So we had Valencia, Acton, We went to the DeLong's house in Palmdale. I mean, all these
Irwindale
races.
Speedway.
Yeah, we had an all-star showdown at Irwindale.
That's a story in itself.
Right. If
I don't know. Can we tell that one? I think there's some NDAs involved in that one.
well,
we don't care.
I feel like the biggest issue is our officiating when there wasn't much to officiate. So
Now, time out, because I was partially in charge of this officiating. The problem that we actually hit.
The problem that we hit was that you were partially in charge. Be honest with yourself here.
Entirely the problem. Part of it was that, and again, it's just such a convoluted story that basically comes down to we probably expected like 10, 15 people to show up.
Right.
So I had all these contingencies. Did we have more than like 30
Can I pause real quick? So, for people who don't know Jeffrey, so everybody outside of us four, when Jeffrey gets a plan going through his brain, he doesn't just come up with things on the fly. At this time, he had a notebook. And he had everything. He still does it to this day. Sometimes on the computer, he'll put a spreadsheet together. But he had every outcome that could be possible figured out. And just like you had said, I believe we had almost 50 competitors go out and buy $20 toy RC cars. And where I screwed up is I kind of was the tech official. So I was just looking to make sure everybody didn't manipulate their car enough, because we know competitors didn't manipulate their cars enough to where there is an advantage. Now, there's people who had lithium batteries, but there wasn't a major power difference. So, okay, where I let things slide, which I shouldn't have, is people were changing out the electronics with the radio. So let me give you a heads up, Charlie, who you have raced RC cars in the past. They were taking the little forward, backwards, left and right radio control and putting a actual remote control,
the one with the wheel?
The one with the wheel and the trigger into electronics, into these things. And I figured at this point, we're out of time. We need to get the show on the road. And then Jeffrey fell into the trap of, well, we have this all set up. We're going to run our heats. And Jeffrey set up the heats nicely. And out of the 6 cars that should have gone, only 3 of them went. And then we had to relocate, threw Jeffrey a curveball, and I think he can talk from here.
Well, the problem that ultimately hit us with all this is that the RC cars run on 2 different frequencies.
Yep.
And because of that, you had people that, we could only do 3 and 3 as far as, our final matchup. And yeah, it was not going to work out the way that we ran all of our heats. And I'm like, well, great. We ended up with 427 hertz, and 2 of the other one. And I'm like, okay. And then I had like 6 people come up and be like, it is impossible for me to not be in the finals. And then I'm like, so this is how Mike Atkinson feels every night as a race director. Yep. So I at one point, I think I just tossed my notebook in the air and went, you know what, you guys just, whoever wants to run in the final, go, and we'll see how it turns out. It was just such a cluster. It was
a disaster, but
it was hilariously bad. It was, but it was also amazing to see how much effort. And again, I feel like this is another one of those topics that we could totally pick up on a day. But one thing I wanted to mention from the RC car racing, funny enough, in connection with Jason, is that if I could be wrong here, and correct me if I am, but was that the first technical time that we handed you a microphone and said, that was the true beginning of Jason Galvin's career.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was in Kenny Mailer's garage in Acton.
Yeah.
It was the first time you handed me the mic.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kenny Mailer's garage had happened pre the Irwindale event.
That was our first time streaming too, I think.
Yeah,
so.
It was streamed that?
We had. By the way,
hit delete right after, I hope.
And we also had $500 in sponsorship.
I do remember you saying that.
Was
over
the most ridiculous. in the climate we're living in right now, where people don't have jobs because of the coronavirus, Roach. I'm not laughing at that, but I'm just saying that in the climate that we're in right now, people are going to listen to this and be like, are these guys for real? We had people sponsoring a $20 Toys R Us car event where we were using like 2-liter sodas of Dr. Pepper for the corner marker.
Guys, don't forget that Tommy went as far as making billboards with popsicle sticks.
He did.
We sold it.
$20, an 8x10 printed picture on a popsicle stick. It was all designed to look low budget, and everybody bought it. It's incredible. And yeah, the winner took home like $250.
Oh my God! It's
because
like
there was a $500 or $600 purse.
It was stupid.
The whole track was lined in sponsorships.
I was leading that race going into the final corner.
You got dumped.
Absolutely dumped. Dumped's not even the right word for it.
I mean, Kyle Petty would have been proud.
Well, for $250, I get it.
Right?
I mean, that pays more than an off-roader is.
Or a Saturday night race at most tracks these days.
Right.
Hey guys, time to pay the bills. Here's a commercial.
When performance matters most, the pros trust Crown Performance. Constructed from Teflon, Kevlar, and stainless steel, Crown Performance brake lines exceed all industry standards, will hold up against the harshest conditions, and provide ultimate stopping power, whether it's for the street or the track. We offer customized sizes and colors to fit any application. Visit crownperformance.com to learn more. crownperformance.com. crownperformance.com.
All right, so I know we're probably getting close to the hour, and obviously this is already shaping up to be 4 or 5 more podcasts with Jason, which is fine because we're all going to keep writing stories in our notebooks, so then we just continuously have to do this. But I do want to switch gears a little bit because we talked about coronavirus, and this is one of my topics going into this. Obviously, we've all been affected by the coronavirus. Thankfully, none of us have come down with it or anything, but everybody in the world has been affected by this, and I don't know of anybody out of the 4 that has been more than you, Jason, because not only we can relate that work has been impacted, but your wife is a nurse, and I'm sure she's going through a lot right now of preparation and stress and everything involved. Of course, you two have a kid, little JJ, at home who you've got to, make sure is being watched and taken care of, and hopefully doesn't see all the stress going around in his little world. But could you kind of give us a little perspective on what the life is at the Galvin household with the scare and this thing spreading around?
Yeah, the coronavirus deal is I mean, to say that it's turned our household upside down would be an understatement, First off, you talked about work, right? So I was in line to board an airplane, literally staring at the walkway down to the plane, waiting to hand in my boarding pass last Thursday morning, when my boss at NHRA called and said, "Don't get on the plane. We're canceling Gainesville," which, I'm a sports guy, as we've mentioned. So I started to get worried about that even possibility Wednesday night, the night before, when Rudy Gobert, the Utah Jazz NBA player, tested positive, and the NBA within 2 hours put their season on hold.
Right.
And I went, uh-oh. Because if the NBA is willing to say we're not playing, that's a big deal. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars every week. When you think about teams and tickets and concessions and beer and TV and advertising and radio and advertising and print and advertising, and it's just
and advertising, crazy. Yeah.
Right. When you think about it, so for them to be so reactionary, immediately told me there was a possibility of that. And in retrospect, man, do I feel lucky, because one of my fellow announcers was on an 8:30 flight out of LAX, and I was on a 10:30 flight. And so you can guess what happened to that announcer. She sat on an airplane with she didn't buy the internet or anything. So she literally got off an airplane, looked at her phone, and texted me, what in the world did I miss?
I'm pretty sure it said and then the 4-letter F word.
What you missed was the whole world shut down in the 5 hours you were on an airplane flying to Florida.
Right.
So,
Jeez.
so there's that. And then later that day, the NCAA canceled sports, and so then I had 30-something baseball and softball games, on TV, whipped out. And, now the NHRA has postponed Las Vegas at the start of April. At least they're the NHRA. What I feel, is kind of fortunate. They're in a spot where they're postponing races because, we run 24 races between the second week of February and the second week of November. So there's some bye weeks in there, and it's going to be a strain on a lot of people. If the NHRA's intention is to return in Houston in the middle of April, and how realistic that is, I guess we'll see. I'll tell you, if it's safe to do so, we're going to race in Houston in the middle of April, and if it's not, they're not going to race. It's that simple. So, there's really no in between. They're not. I assure you, the NHRA is not trying to be some sort of groundbreaking, lead the charge, prove everybody wrong type of deal. So,
right.
But hopefully we get to race in Houston, and then if not, then you look at Charlotte's 2 weeks after that, and you start looking, we're getting to the busy time of the year for drag racing, but at least they have, room to make stuff up. That NASCAR is going to be going on 2, 3, 4 races at some point here, and they don't have 8 bye weeks built into their season, so that was a big, that's a big hit for me, and I feel kind of fortunate that our family is at least in a position to be able to weather that storm, because I do work for the family business too, and my wife, as you mentioned, is a nurse, and she's got such a stable job, and obviously now more than ever, you look at the importance of what she does, but still a big blow. So conversely, I sit here and think about, I know a lot of people in a lot of different spaces. They work in restaurants, hospitality, entertainment. They work in sports media who now don't have jobs, for God knows how long, and don't have anything to fall back on, and that's rough. So, my stress over this deal has come more so from that, and thinking about, people that I know and care about, and, what the heck are they going to do, and then there's, the elephant in the room in our household of my wife is a nurse in a hospital, and in a prominent hospital here in Bakersfield, and she has a prominent role in that hospital. And we talked about it a lot. She goes, and I don't know when this posts versus when we're recording, but she goes back to work. What is, it'll be Thursday night, and she hasn't been to work in like 8 days because, she works 3 straight overnight 12-hour shifts, and then she gets, a couple days off and goes back and works 3 more. And she had some training last week, so her schedule got pushed back earlier in the week. So she's had more time off than usual, which is kind of a weird deal, because her last day working was 36 hours before the country started to shut down, which was Wednesday night. So she's not been back to work since this hit the way that it's hit, So there's definitely, you mentioned we have a son who's 17 months old this week, and there's some concern about that. The equally as concerning, her mom is our primary babysitting source, and anybody who's done their diligence to actually read about the coronavirus, not just brush it off as some sort of political hoax or scam, knows that it's elderly people, it's people with immune system issues. They're immunocompromised. It's people who smoked. It's there's a whole list of people who could be severely impacted by this, and that's a little nerve-wracking. I think that hit her and I a little more today. We talked about it more seriously today, as it pertains to her going back to work and what her work is doing. Kern County has not had any positive tests. They had one test this week, was the first test, but that person even was somebody who was visiting from New York, so they contracted it in New York and then had flown here before realizing they had it. And that's the other thing that people don't understand is scary about this, is that you can have it for a long time and not realize it. You could have it for a long time and not even present, but pass it to somebody else. I'd shared a deal on Facebook today. I've been more vocal about this deal than somebody who's in the media normally would be about things that are kind of hot topics, because it's kind of taboo and frowned upon to be vocal about these things. But to me, this is not a political thing. This is a health deal. And while I certainly understand that the optics of it is that it's just the flu and the flu kills more people, I get all of that. I really do. But at the same time, the health professionals, that's who I look at here. I'm not turning to the governor of California or the president of the United States that we're being fair here and circling both sides of the aisle. I'm looking at the WHO and the CDC and people whose job it is to study these things, and they have a concern. And for me, that's good enough. And I understand it's putting a lot of people in a tough spot, and I'm not sitting here going, oh my gosh, the world's going to end, but we're certainly being cautious about things. And I'd be lying if I wasn't a little concerned about her going back to work. They're testing people every day for the potential of having this deal. It's a crazy deal. I don't think any of us ever thought that we'd live to see something like this.
Yeah, it's incredible, and that's why I wanted to get your perspective on this, because you have a way different perspective than the three of us do. We're all missing our sports and our fun, and I know you are, because it's not just motorsports that you were involved in. You were getting ready for a huge March Madness and everything else within your ESPN work and everything else. But crazy times, and hopefully we just weather this quicker than ever. And I think that's what obviously is going to be. That's where I look back on things. Is this a scary virus? Yeah, it is, I think, but I do, as much as I hate the restrictions and the mandatory distance from people and everything, because it is taking away from my fun and others' work, it's also probably the best thing, because then we can get through it faster and we can go racing.
So it's interesting. I don't know how long you guys want to talk about this or whatever, but I'll just point out here that if there's ever anybody in our circle, at least, that we could turn to, to truly see, that yes, we can go without, some things that we like for a couple of weeks, or even if it, God forbid, turns into a couple of months, and yes, we'll be okay. It's you, Tommy, because, Charlie didn't know you then, but Jeffrey and I lived through your cancer battle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And when you were going through treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, right?
Correct. Yep. Which is very similar to leukemia. It's a cousin cancer of leukemia, which you mentioned earlier.
Correct. So when you were going through your treatment, it was a similar deal, right? We had to be more vigilant around you. If either of us or any of, or Shayla or your parents or anybody else weren't feeling good, we couldn't come around you. Yep. You couldn't go to the movies. You couldn't come to the racetrack every week. You missed some races. You missed some things. Mm-hmm. And you got through it because you had to. Right.
And I think, Jeffrey actually brought up a very good question. We went to what could be the last race for a few months out at the dirt track at Kern County Raceway Park. Mm-hmm. And on the way up, he turned to me in the passenger seat and said, "Are you nervous? Do you feel like this is a bad thing right now for you because you've gone through cancer and the treatments and everything?" And I turned to Jeffrey and I said, "I would be, and I am. There is a part of me, that's not going to go out there and try to get sick and lick doorknobs, but
which is new for him,
right? I used to do
incredibly
that, new. But
where's
as
the
much as
video, Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not there.
But I would go around. I would still go out and do things. I would just be cautious about it, and I think that's reality. Is I was doing all these things without any white blood cell count, without any immune system, and I'm doing, now we're dealing with this, and I actually have something to fight against. So I think that's really to go off of what you're saying, Jason, is for the people who are torn up and bummed out and upset and everything about how bad life is right now. It's not. It could be worse.
Right.
We got to help each other by not letting it.
Yeah, actually, it's funny how you mentioned, about people complaining, because what really annoyed me, and, nobody here is happy that, this is happening, but it really annoyed me when I would see people complaining when races were getting canceled, going to the point where they were asking for their money back for, like, a stream they paid for, like NBC Gold Pass, and, like, I want my money back because there's no racing. And it's like, do you guys not realize there's something bigger? Like, this is like this is even crazier than 9/11 in the sense that even though 9/11 was bad, but it didn't shut the country down indefinitely.
This is global.
And yeah, that's the thing. 9/11 was only in America, whereas this is everybody, and we don't know how long this is going to be.
I have treaded water making that comparison, but I made it last week privately to some people, and in that sense, right? And I get it, before people blow us up. Like, yes, 9/11, like, more people died than have died in America so far by a bunch, right? And, I get all of that stuff. But as far as stopping society, and we all lived through 9/11, I can walk you through almost every minute of every day of that week. That's how much 9/11 impacted me. But the world stopped on September 11th. It really didn't start on the 12th. It didn't even really start on the 13th, which was a Thursday. But by Friday the 14th, it was coming back around, right? And then and then we got into the weekend, and then we got baseball back, and then we got football back, and then we got NASCAR at Dover back. And, like, things have never been the same since then, and things weren't the same that week. But things came back real quick, you know?
They didn't tell us to stay home.
Right. And the thing about 9/11 is 9/11 happened, and we all watched it on TV, and we all knew, right? Like, we watched that and went, oh, man, like, life stops today. Nobody on Wednesday of last week, before ESPN said Rudy Gobert tested positive for the coronavirus. And for those of you who are listening to this and you're like, why is Rudy Gobert? He's an NBA All-Star. He's one of the 24 best players in basketball in the world. Tested positive. And then 30 minutes later, the Pelicans and Kings refused to play because the referee had refereed a game that Rudy Gobert played in 48 hours earlier. And, like, since that moment, we've been in an unprecedented spot in society, in global history, where we've actually watched the shutdown of the world happen. And that's never happened before, right? Like, 9/11, nobody woke up at 6 a.m. in New York City and went, today is the day somebody's going to fly a plane into the World Trade Centers, right?
Right.
Nobody woke up on December 7th and said, today is the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, right? Like, things that stopped our country. Nobody woke up and went, today is the day the president gets shot at a parade in Dallas. So, like, we're in a situation where the country has stopped. Just on the country, forget the world part of things, the country has stopped in ways that it's only stopped in events like that. 9/11, JFK, World War II, it's the Civil War, President Lincoln was, murdered. Like, very few, the stock market crashes and the Great Depression starts. Like, those things you couldn't see coming. But I think by Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, we all started to go, man, we're like one important person away from this turning into a really big deal. And Rudy Gobert got it, and the next morning we woke up and Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson had it. And man, like, I found out about Tom Hanks sitting on a bus on the flyaway to LAX at like 7 a.m. and went, oh boy. Like, now we've got a basketball player and the league is stopped, and we got an actor, and like we have had a front row seat to society grinding to a halt. And in a day and age where nobody stops for anything.
Right.
anything, right? Like, we have phones and computers and the internet, and damned if I'm not announcing a national event for the NHRA, and in between cars going down the track, I'm looking at my phone, answering a text or an email about one of the other businesses that I'm associated with, right? That's the world that we live in. You are always on the clock, whether you like it or not, and you're connected, and damned if this thing didn't just come in. And if we take anything from anything, it's that maybe we all can just sit back and relax every once in a while. Because I don't know that we've done that as a society in the last 10, 15 years since iPhones and smartphones and the internet and Twitter and Facebook, and, you know, for all the good that they do, the terrible that they can do in between because of the maliciousness of people. And you know, like, that might be the one saving grace that we all take out of this, you know, 3 years from now, because we might sit back and go, you know what, turns out life will go on, you know, like, we will find a way to persevere. We dealt with no sports and being confined to home and not going to the bar after work for, you know, a month or 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is, and we discovered that it's actually okay to talk to your spouse again and to talk to your friends and family and not just send them a text every once in a while. You know, that might be the thing we take out of this. But it is absolutely crazy to think about what we've been able to witness over the last, you know, week or so. Very, very few times in life do you know stuff is coming and get to watch it unfold. And we're in that rare spot right now.
Well put. Yeah. You know, and just like for anyone that is listening, it's, you know, I'm no doctor, obviously, as we've discussed. You know, Jason, your wife, is right in the middle of this in regards to you know, nursing and being at the hospital. But the way I've approached this, and I feel like, you know, maybe everybody listening to this gets it or is already handling it that way, but it still feels like it's good to say, is I feel like the best way to treat this situation is just assume that you have it. Like, not saying to freak out about it, but go about, you know, being careful around others, washing your hands, you know, to me, it's all very basic stuff that, you know, I would kind of hoped people would have known before this happened, but just I found out, but you know, just those basics of just being, you know, extra courteous, because again, even though, you know, us in here in our age group, you know, we're not as concerned in regards to what will happen to us. It's all about how can this affect people that we love, and that's what we got to be careful about.
But even we should be, because we sit here with Tommy, and Tommy is a prime candidate of what a healthy, you know, I want to call you 20-something. Did you turn 30 this year? I got to do math on this stuff.
30 plus 1, so we're good.
Wow,
but you can call me a 20-something. That's okay.
Yeah, well,
I still look like a 20-something.
We're all getting up there, right?
Yeah.
But like Tommy's not, you know, and I'm sure he knows this, you know, without, you know, harping on it. But Tommy's, because of his past history with cancer and whatnot, like, he's not exactly, you know, a glowing example of, you know, let me get this, life will be good, you know, like it would be a concern if you got it, you know. Here, real quick, and I don't know, you know, we're here to have fun and talk racing, but not to project doom and gloom. But this is something that Jackie Frick, who drives an alcohol dragster in NHRA competition, national event winning driver, she's phenomenal, posted today, and I shared it. I've not shared a lot of things on this, but I just want to read you guys this, because to me it put into perspective what so many people have failed to understand when they've just brushed this off as, oh, it's just the flu or whatever, right? So fast forward 2 weeks from today. You wake up with a deep cough, a fever, and full body aches. You go to the doctor. You're diagnosed with coronavirus, COVID-19 to be exact. For the last 2 weeks, you were totally unaware you were infected. So for the last 2 weeks, you continued on with your life as normal. You socialized with friends. You went to the gym, restaurants, bars. You refused to even entertain the idea of social distancing because, well, you don't feel sick. So you spend a few days on the couch feeling pretty crummy, and then you're well again. You've recovered because you're young and healthy and invincible. Meanwhile, the 82-year-old grandfather that you brushed and made contact with, or the person with the compromised immune system that looked totally healthy, aren't so lucky. That's why social distancing matters. It's not about you. She wrote that, and it was like everything that people need to understand. It's not about you. Like, yes, if you get it, 98% chances are life will be. And I've had a couple people who've said that, and they're like, yes, but the flu. And it's like, yes, if you have the flu, you should also stay home.
Right.
Like, seriously, I didn't realize this was such a tough deal for us to understand as a society. But it turns out if you're sick, you should stay home. Like,
my cap on it is
whiz.
Right. My cap on it is I don't want to get sick, let alone the flu or the coronavirus.
Right.
You know, I get all pissed off when I get cold.
The cold pisses me off.
Yeah. So
we all talk for a living, or at least part of it. Like, I get a cold, like, you know, gosh, I'd rather like break an ankle than get the cold. Like,
Yeah, last thing any of us want to do is sound like Vince Welch at Daytona.
Poor
right.
Vince, man.
I mean,
so bad for him.
I mean, am I wrong?
God, I felt bad. No, you're right, but I felt so bad. Man, was he a trooper though?
He
was
muscled
not
it.
missing Daytona. I don't blame him. I wouldn't miss Daytona either. But, but man, that was tough.
Damn. Cold-blooded.
Yeah.
Yeah, just saved it to the
Hey,
end.
Charlie, welcome back.
Jeffrey with the headshot.
I know, man.
I feel like we've hijacked this deal.
We have.
Charlie, Tommy, and Jeffrey show, and Jason's the guest.
Well, what's gonna happen? What's gonna
Charlie said,
happen?
like 4 words.
Right. What's gonna happen is when we start really getting in depth with you and NHRA, and Charlie's got the questions. That's where Jeff and I are out. We're just gonna be passengers of the ride. So
Cars go fast, straight line.
right.
When we come around to next January, we got to talk Rolex 24, because when I tell everybody, I mean, I'm not going to tell it now because we're going to wind this down today. We're going to save.
Oh my gosh.
Can't use up all the good bullets, but
Right.
you know, when I tell the Rolex 24 story, because I don't even know if you know why it happened at the end. What happened? I don't know if you understand how the sandwich.
Do you know anything about a sandwich, Jason?
No, I still don't understand why you got back in the car, honestly. That's
Part of that's because one of the reasons I bought the damn game was to run this damn race, which I still have not yet been able to really run properly. And then in the end, what undid everything was a sandwich, which we'll get to another day, because there's more to this.
Looking forward to that story.
Because it has to do with my reputation at work.
Yeah.
And
It's-
sandwiches.
What happened? I mean, like, we'll get to it, but
It's-
what the hell?
Sandwiches have been good and bad for me.
Jason Galvin Part 2 next Wednesday.
We'll have to say this for another
Does
time.
Lucas know about your sandwiches?
No, but a few other coworkers do.
Okay, well, that's
So,
good.
and a certain Rockstar fridge that isn't there anymore.
Oh, okay.
And
I'm so confused.
Oh yeah, what a tease.
Charlie and I could probably talk NHRA pretty good.
yes,
Right.
we
We didn't
can.
even talk about NHRA tonight. Like,
Yeah, I know. We'll get in that another time. So we'll have plenty. There will be a lot of people we talk to multiple times, especially now since there's not anything to do.
well,
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Jason, for joining us. It was a really fun chat, and you know we'll be talking again, I'm sure.
Of course, anytime, man. Anytime I could jump on with you guys and catch up and reminisce, man. Like Tommy and Jeffrey have said a couple times, we could probably do a daily podcast for a couple of weeks and still have content.
Oh yeah.
I'll say that's that's the cool thing for me, and I know I've told them a couple times, but it's always good to reiterate so that they remember, because especially now, right? We've all got our own jobs, and we don't see each other like we used to, which was 3 or 4 days a week. But really, if it wasn't for Tommy and Jeffrey, I don't know where I'm at today. And I've been so damn lucky. When you think about some of the things I've gotten to do in my career, and even just the Irwindale stuff, we could tell the story one day on another show about the time that, you know, I showed up at the track to be the number 3 announcer on the PA and ended up sitting in a broadcast booth with Pat Patterson and Mike Skinner on Sirius XM radio for 4 hours, you know, as the co-commentator for a race. And, you know, just that story is crazy. And the things I've gotten to experience in my life, you know, and if it wasn't for these 2 guys, you know, who knows? You know, you never know where life goes without certain moments and whatnot. But you know, for all that we've all been through, you know, and in our lives, there's one thing that's been a pretty constant over the last, you know, 13 or 14 years now, and that's that if the 3 of us get together, you know, it's like the last time we saw each other was last week, and you know, that's something I'll forever be grateful for, and it's a pretty darn cool deal when you sit back and think about it.
Amen.
Well, thanks, folks, for listening to the Racing Foolz podcast, powered by Low Budget TV and brought to you by Crown Performance. We'll catch. How do I even end this? Join us next time when we talk more racing. Or I don't even know how to.
Peace out, everybody.
I hope you just keep all this.
Yeah, I'll just keep all this. Like we don't script anything on this.
No,
dude. This is all. You know.
Thanks, Crown, for putting the show to a halt.
We're gonna GTFO.
Right.
I'm the least. Like it's funny that I'm the one like doing the intro and outro. I'm the least qualified announcer here.
But that's what makes us all great.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
We're prepping you, Charlie.
We didn't even know how to get Jason on this damn call until, you know. So.
You're on the path to stardom after this. Just remember that.
I'm just here to listen to the stories, all right? So.
That's not a bad job.
See y'all later.
The Racing Foolz podcast is produced by TQ Media House in association with Low Budget TV. Special thanks goes out to Tommy and Jeffrey from Low Budget TV, Kelly McGuire for the free mic and mixer, and Ramon Ariola for helping create various show elements. Music is provided by RFM, royalty-free music in the YouTube audio library. If you like what you hear, give Low Budget TV a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what you think. We welcome all questions, comments, and ideas, and who knows, maybe your idea will be the next topic on the Racing Foolz podcast.